New Year's in the 1910s is really no different from the last decade. Lots of people getting intoxicated, lots of partying, food, card games, and the countdown. The record player has been circulating in the mass market for quite some time now, and has since found its way into many homes, beginning its gradual and eventual displacement of traditional sheet music and home performance. Now, if you wanted to play music during your celebrations, you didn't have to pause your card game to do it. However, listening to one of your friends try to drunkenly play Take Me Out to the Ball Game is probably more entertaining than listening to the recording. For Americans, the one New Year spent in wartime in the later part of the decade would have had a slightly more somber atmosphere. Additionally, if you were a really patriotic citizen, you would have applied voluntary rationing to your New Year's celebrations when it came to food and drink. I will have a more detailed video on this topic later in the year. A basic rundown is this. Because men, horses, and food supplies were being contributed to the war effort and providing aid for European civilians, there was less to go around on the home front. The idea of a mandatory rationing system was thrown around as such systems were gradually being implemented in Europe as the war dragged on, but this idea was turned down in favor for a voluntary rationing system. It was Congress's belief at the time that a voluntary rationing system was better for a handful of reasons, but primarily because the sheer cost and impracticality of a mandatory rationing system in the US, and that the American people could be trusted to share the burden for the good of all and to support the war effort. The voluntary rationing system worked thusly. Use less wheat and substitute corn, barley, oats, or other cereals. Use less red meat and substitute fish and beans. Use less fats all around and use less sugar, substituting honey, syrups, and molasses. Meatless Mondays, despite it actually being Tuesdays that were the meatless days, and wheatless Wednesdays had their origin here, and there was an emphasis on eating locally produced foods and preserving all that you could. I decided to cook for New Year's in accordance with the voluntary rationing system because I thought it would be interesting, as American cuisine doesn't really change until the 30s or 40s. January 1st, 1918 was a Tuesday, so no meat aside from fish, though I did cheat a little by using leftover meat. The dishes I decided to cook were also low fat and low sugar, the sweets being more sweetener based. And of course, all the baked goods used at least 30% substituted cereals. Instead of cooking with or serving fruits and vegetables that were out of season, I decided to use only in-season produce ideally grown locally. Considering this is well into winter, this was basically just onions. I also used leftover meat and fish in the main dish instead of buying red meat for it. For this New Year's celebration, I have made cornbread using leftover bacon grease served with preserves, jambalaya using leftover sausage and the bulk of the protein coming from white fish. And instead of the typical New Year's cake, I made bran muffins with about half the sugar being substituted with molasses. I also baked smaller portions this year instead of the feast we usually have for the holidays in an effort to curtail food waste as much as possible. That's all I really have to say about New Year's. A lot of the holidays won't see much change for a few decades, and some won't even see any change at all. So I'll be skipping over the ones that don't change much this year, which is pretty much all of them. But that will give me more time to focus on other topics related to the 1910s, such as... So this coming decade will be more event and politics focused rather than general daily life, since it doesn't really change much from the established groundwork. I'll still be doing my laundry by hand, I'll still be heating my bath water on the stove, and I will still be limiting my use of modern technology as much as practical. All in all, my prediction for this decade is that things will be going on in the big wide world that may or may not trickle down to affect me personally, but my day-to-day life won't see much change. At least for the first 3/4-ish of the decade, but you'll have to wait until August for that.